What does it mean to have natal Saturn in your 4th house? I mean, it sucks, honestly. It just does. But those of you who don't have Saturn in your 4th house, don't be laughing or smiling. This is a little bit of a situation like back in grade school when we had to get up and give a public speech in front of the whole school or the whole class. It sucks. You're totally nervous. You're not really used to doing that. And it's someone else's turn. As long as it's not your turn, you're just like, well, life is great. But you know you're coming. You have Saturn somewhere, wherever it shows up in your chart. That area of your life is going to be a little bit sucky until you work through what Saturn has to teach you. And so I say Saturn in the 4th sucks mostly in jest, or completely in jest, because you always have to have an attitude of optimism, of willingness to work through the challenges. And if you're watching this video, you're going to figure it out. You're figuring it out. You're on the right track. Not to say that I have all of the answers or I'm going to give you the sage advice that helps you do that. It just means that you're aware of it and you're working on it and you're thinking about it, which is usually the precursor to a lot of growth. What do we need to know about Saturn in the 4th house? Let's talk a little bit about the 4th house first. The 4th house, it's the base of everything. From a Jungian perspective, it is our unconscious, our subconscious. It is our psychic, emotional, instinctual inheritance. So it's how we were raised, how we were nurtured, how our home life was, what our parents were like. Of course, this is also related to what we are like as an individual on the most private level, like who we are at home, who we are when we're alone, what kind of things are we instinctually attracted to, or how do we respond to the world in ways that make us feel safe and familiar and nurtured. The 4th house part of ourselves it's before the rational, reflective mind. It's coming from the subconscious, that psychic karmic inheritance. And none of that, however that might be, none of that is necessarily fixed or permanent, but it requires a lot more work to gain awareness over it, to change it, to work with it. Again, because usually we're just not even aware of the source of why we react spontaneously in the ways that we do. 4th house also represents, like I said earlier, our parents. Sometimes it can be the mother, sometimes it can be the father. I like to think about it. It says something about both parents, but it's usually the parent that had maybe the greater amount of influence on shaping us or raising us. Sometimes there's a pretty clear and distinct parent in that situation, sometimes not. And when we have Saturn, wherever we have it, there's some blockage. There is restriction, delays, something that we were deprived of, or something that we faced limitations around. And because of that, it affects us very significantly in that area of life. And it manifests in a variety of ways. The TLDR is that usually we're facing a lot more challenges in this particular area of life than maybe compared to other people or people that don't have Saturn there. Of course, comparison, it's the thief of joy. We shouldn't really be comparing, but just as a means of explaining it, that's what's going on wherever Saturn shows up. And so in the 4th house, the house of our child rearing, of how our parents raised us, how they nurtured us, Saturn there is tough. Saturn here can sometimes indicate a lack of nurturing in early childhood life. Maybe the parents weren't very emotional and very caring or very open or good at expressing that. Sometimes Saturn here, like Pluto in the 4th house, it can mean the death of a parent, the absence of a parent, maybe a little bit of a broken home, maybe a divorce, maybe separated parents, maybe parents that didn't really work together. It could also be a parent that left. I'm saying it in a million different ways, but typically that's the theme. It could also be 2 parents that are there, but again, they just didn't really provide that safety. They didn't provide the protection that we would typically really want. Sometimes this also indicates that there was just a lot of Saturnian, Capricornian themes around our childhood, where things like emotions, how we feel, whether we were happy, whether we felt seen, those things weren't valued. And it was more about hard work and discipline and these ideas that you gotta grind and do your part, do your chores, and don't complain. It's not about you. Maybe it's about the parents, or it's about the family, or it's just the nature of circumstances. Maybe there were restrictive circumstances materially or in terms of the value system that you were a part of. It was just very much more just disciplined, cold, mechanical, machine-like. But look, we can talk about the what happens all we want. It's not super helpful. If you have this placement, you can relate to this. You probably know what Saturn in here meant for you. Let's talk about now how it's going to maybe manifest in your life, or how it's manifesting in your life. At a very raw level, there is just a very felt sense of a lack of security, a lack of safety, a lot of anxiety about the future, a lot of worry about the future, even in the confines of your own home. It's really hard for this person to be able to recharge, feel just comfortable, confident, and safe. There might be a lot of carried tension. It could be about anything. A lot of stress. Sometimes this is related to the literal family or physical home. Maybe you want to have a house and you worry that you're not going to get it, or you have a house but there's something that's threatening that, or you want to create this family but it's not coming together, or you don't have it, or other people in your life seem to have the perfect family and you just feel very isolated and alone and like just lonely in your private life. Sometimes Saturn here is experienced more on a psychological or emotional level, where your ability to get really deep with how you're feeling and your feelings, and to express them in your close relationships or in your friendships or even in your family, in those private parts of your life, it's very hard. There's a hardness about you, or a calcification. I can say all these things that you might experience. I think the best way to think about any place, I'm going to start saying this in all my Saturn videos because I think it's a super helpful concept. It's a concept from a book called Reality Transurfing, and the author talks about this idea of excess importance. And anything that we apply excess importance to ends up kind of shooting us in the foot, like it's something that's extremely important, but we focus so much on it that we actually make it worse, or because it is such a need, or because it's something that we felt we've always lacked, we overcompensate and end up kind of recreating the same circumstances that we had and want to course correct. Someone here that is emotionally maybe cold, or has a really hard time expressing or revealing emotions or sharing those with another person, it's not that they don't necessarily want those things or want that kind of relationship, but there is so much resistance and there can be negativity, and there can be a feeling that it's not going to happen, or frustration that it hasn't happened. And so they are like, what's the point of me giving this? Because I'm not going to get it. I'm going to get shut down. Something is going to happen. And then that's just going to cause more pain, more weakness, whatever. And so I'm just going to harden and self-protect. On the other hand, maybe you're so over the top or over serious or intense about it. And so you put the weight of the fact that you didn't have these things, or you lack those things, onto the people or the circumstances of your life. And you expect that they're going to be capable of filling these gaping wounds inside you. And while they can participate and share some of those things, like felt sense of nurturing and safety and being at home, you can't put the weight of that, the weight of your trauma, the weight of your lack on anyone. And maybe sometimes you do that, and that also causes you to end up not getting those things. So that's the idea of excess importance. It's either like you're so focused on it that you're really closed off, you're protective, you are not going to give an inch because you need to protect the wounds, or you're so gung-ho and determined to course correct and get those things that you push it and repel it away. And then again, you end up in the same place. And so it's not a question of what approach is, it's an issue of moving away from the obsession or the strong focus, the excess importance, which is very much easier said than done. This is a tough position for Saturn because everything in our life, it extends. It's like trees, plants, whatever. Like it all begins with the seed and the roots. And if you have an incredibly strong root structure, you can grow and be the highest tree, maybe, I don't know. But one thing's for sure is if you can't lay strong roots or that is compromised, like you're not going anywhere. And having an afflicted fourth house is a little bit having this compromised root structure. When you don't feel safe and secure at home and in your own skin, it's very hard to have confidence in your career. It's hard to have confidence in relationships. It's hard to go out and explore and achieve your dreams and be fearless. It's hard to be a part of groups and get buy-in and be a leader and seek those things out. You're very much kind of stuck in this trap. It's a little bit like, maybe this is a poor example, but you see those videos on the dodo, right? About those dogs, they're not treated well and someone first finds them in a house or they get dropped off at a shelter and the dog is they're just stuck in kind of crisis mode. Their trust has been destroyed. They've only known danger in that area. There's no safety. And so that's why they lash out until they build that trust back up. People with a fourth house Saturn, it might not be that they're emotionally cold, but sometimes just there's blockage or self-sabotage around the process of opening up. It's jagged, or there's emotional lops where they're good at kind of the introductory parts of building a connection, and then it gets to a certain point and they push it away, maybe unconsciously, because again, they get scared, and so maybe they lash out, or that's where this kind of unpredictability or instability might be apparent. This can also be someone that has some really buried resentment or negativity, or buried kind of undealt with anger, or at least just undealt with emotion. And this isn't meant to be all sort of doom and gloom. A lot of this video is me trying to really explain and teach how I understand the placement. But the important thing to remember is that if you are watching this, you're seeking out knowledge around themes of personal growth and personal reflection, you're going to get there. You're on the right track. I will say that the key for this placement, like a lot of stuff when we talk about Saturn, is just it's staying in the cockpit. With Saturn, there's no quick fix. There's not going to be a magic pill. There's not going to be something in a 20-minute YouTube video that I'm going to tell you and it's going to suddenly click. Saturn it's a slower moving planet. We talk about Saturn returns, Saturn cycles as major cycles in our life, major rites of passage. And so Saturn moves in 29-year cycles, right? Growth through Saturn is very permanent when it arrives. It's very has a lot of staying power. It takes a long time to build. And so be gentle with yourself. Be patient. Understand that you've experienced challenges that maybe not everyone has. And maybe that means they can't always be as empathetic with them, but you have to really develop an ability to be empathetic with yourself. You didn't get that necessarily, or for some reason there's a deficiency there. And the key to bringing more of that into your life is being able to nurture and really love yourself. And there's no one way to get there. Whatever way you get there, if you get there at all, that's a hard journey, and there's going to be speed bumps. But that's the name of the game with this placement. It's really, as much as possible, trying not to harden, trying to resist the temptation to apply a lens of kind of negativity and lack and a victim kind of mindset to your experiences. Because when you do that, you get trapped in perpetuating the same circumstances, because if you have such a negative opinion of how things are going to end up, if you don't feel like you're able to create the kind of beautiful home life, the serene, pleasant, comfortable, loving foundation, then the rest of the world isn't either. You are probably going to have more of a serious disposition, or be maybe what someone would say is more of an older soul. But through your experience, you've acquired, whether you realize it or not, a ton of wisdom, a ton of resilience. And as you continue to navigate your life, especially as you get into your first, second Saturn return, you're continue to build inner strength and inner resilience, whether you realize it or not. And again, the important thing to keep in mind is to keep pushing and challenging yourself. Understand that I don't think you're ever going to be the most silly, kind of totally emotionally expressive, wear your heart on your sleeve person. There's always going to be a little bit of a serious disposition about you, but seriousness does not have to mean isolation. Also, time spent alone doesn't necessarily mean that's time where you're not loved or time when you're abandoned. The key is not to abandon yourself. And the people that master this position, what's really amazing is that they end up learning how to provide for themselves what maybe they lacked. And no one is going to be able to do that as well as them. They have this kind of inner safety and inner calm and serenity that can come. And everyone else, while they may have gotten some of those things as children, like they don't really know how to deal with a world or with a life in which that stuff is taken away. Or with you, like you're fine. Like you're going to weather every other storm that comes, piece of cake. Self-sufficiency, though, self-love, it doesn't mean, right, dismissing the value of love or dismissing the value of vulnerability. Because if you do that and you say, I didn't get it, I don't need it, it doesn't even matter, I'm fine without it, again, that's excess importance, you're hardening, you're not really doing it. It's important to acknowledge, not that this thing is bad, but that you didn't have it and your life is grown in a way that has benefited in a different way. A little bit of a harder path, but its own way. And don't close yourself off. This is what I'm trying to say, is opportunities for that stuff to come in your life. Because once you really kind of build that safety for yourself, if you're interested, you're going to see it just kind of naturally come into your life. You'll attract it, right? It's kind of when you stop hyper focusing on it, when you reduce importance, that it is given to you on a platter. Deep psychoanalysis, therapy, psychotherapy can be super helpful for this position. Things that really reach into the subconscious and better integrate the subconscious with the conscious. Those things are going to be super helpful for you along this journey. So again, like therapy, journaling, yoga, meditation, things that make you feel very grounded, very safe, very nurtured are super important. As you're on this path, if you're on this path, definitely something to consider.